My wife planned to ruin me at our anniversary party. So I secretly recorded her, exposed her lies in court, and took everything in the divorce. I'm still in shock as I write this. My entire life crumbled 3 days ago, and I'm attempting to make sense of it by writing everything down. This is difficult to even spell out. I never imagined I'd be one of those guys who talk about their failed relationships on Reddit. I'm using Nathan and Kelsey's names because they appear to be the most common fake names on this sub, and I'm concerned that anyone we know may connect this to us. Even though the circumstance seems absurd, I'm sure anyone who was present would recognize it right away. I suppose I should begin by noting that, until 3 days ago, I thought I had a solid marriage, not perfect, who is, but steady. We had plans for the future, but I think they went down the drain. For perspective, my wife Kelsey has always had an explosive personality. When she doesn't get her way or someone challenges her ideas, she quickly goes from 0 to 100. She speaks quickly, gets loud, occasionally throws small objects, smashes doors, and generally acts like a cyclone until people submit to her will. Then she will give you the quiet treatment until she gets what she desires. I've put up with this for years because I love her, and to be honest, I've gotten used to appeasing her in order to avoid the drama. I understand how that sounds, believe me, I do. But you know how it goes. You don't realize the water is growing hotter until you're already boiling. After 10 years together, I developed all these coping mechanisms, all these ways of attempting to maintain calm. I learned to anticipate her moods, to recognize the earliest signs of a rising storm, and to do anything I could to calm it down before it erupted. Before I get to the main event, I'd want to offer you a few examples to help you understand what I've been dealing with all these years. 3 years ago, we were planning some substantial changes to our home. Nothing too wild, just replacing the kitchen and remodeling the master bath. We had been saving for it for years, and I was delighted to finally make our house feel like ours rather than just the starter home we had purchased. Kelsey took over the project right away, which was okay with me because she has always had a keen eye for design. But then she chose a contractor she loved without doing any research. She simply decided this guy was the one after a single meeting in which he supposedly charmed the pants off her. When I looked at their quote, which was far higher than our budget, I detected various red flags. The timeline seems overly optimistic. They claimed they could gut and rebuild our entire kitchen in 2 weeks, which anyone who has done renovations knows is ludicrous. Furthermore, the materials section was strangely ambiguous, just premium countertops and high-quality cabinetry with no specifications regarding brands, models, or even materials. I'd read enough renovation horror stories on Reddit to know this was a formula for disaster, so I politely recommended we obtain a few more estimates to compare. I wasn't accusing her of making a bad decision. I simply believed it was the prudent thing to do with such a large investment. You'd have thought I suggested we set the house on fire. She quickly lost it, yelling that I was destroying the project, that I didn't trust her judgment, and that she'd handle everything on her own. She claimed I was always like this, finding flaws in her ideas, and attempting to make her feel stupid. Then she stormed out and gave me the quiet treatment for 2 days, acting as if I were invisible in our own home, all because I suggested getting various quotations for a major house renovation. I ultimately persuaded her to obtain a second opinion, primarily by keeping renovation horror stories open on my laptop where she could accidentally read them. We ultimately received a second bid, and, surprise, surprise, the original contractor was significantly overpriced with an unrealistic schedule. The second company brought out a variety of difficulties that the first individual had overlooked. Kelsey went with the second firm but never said she was wrong, or apologized for her outburst. Instead, she pretended the entire conflict never happened, and moved on as if hiring a second contractor had always been her goal. I was so pleased we weren't being duped that I didn't press it, just added it to my mental list of battles not worth waging. Another time, maybe 18 months ago, we were preparing our annual trip. It was my turn to choose the destination. We'd always taken turns, which worked well for us. We had previously discussed doing something outside, such as staying in a cottage near a national park with good hiking paths. We both liked the outdoors, or so I thought. Kelsey had always seemed to like our previous hiking expeditions. We'd spend our evenings sitting around the campfire, drinking wine and talking for hours under the stars. These were some of my fondest memories from our relationship. I'd been looking into choices for months, had a whole folder of bookmarks on my laptop. Affordable cabins near Yosemite, guided hiking trips, even a company that would supply gourmet meal kits to your cabin so we could cook together without having to arrange everything ourselves. I was truly thrilled about it and kept dropping hints about what I was preparing, and Kelsey appeared to be intrigued, asking questions and looking forward to it. But then, out of nowhere, she arrived home one day, carrying a travel magazine. She'd heard of a luxurious resort in the Caribbean with private plunge pools, personal butlers, and God knows what else. That was suddenly where we were headed, despite the fact that it was much above our agreed-upon vacation budget, more than 3 times what we had planned to spend. When I reminded her of the outside plans I'd been working on for months and gently emphasized the budget issue, she went ballistic, saying that I was being difficult on purpose and attempting to deprive her of experiences that everyone else has. She said that all of our friends got to go on expensive trips, which was not true, and that I was embarrassing her by being poor, which was also false. I'm simply responsible with our money. She tossed a decorative pillow across the room, knocking over and damaging a picture frame containing our wedding pictures, which suddenly seemed meaningful, and proclaimed that the outdoor trip would not take place. She stated she'd booked the luxury hotel herself if I was going to be such a downer. She then slammed our bedroom doors so hard that a painting fell off the wall and ignored me for several hours. I ended up sleeping on the couch, and when I mentioned it the next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. The next day, she booked the resort, charging it to our shared credit card before I could complain further. I didn't oppose it since it was pointless. She'd already made up her mind, and I knew from experience that continuing to protest would only result in days or weeks of tension and passive-aggressive digs. We went to a posh hotel. It was nice, I suppose, but I couldn't enjoy it knowing how much it cost and how we got there. This cycle repeated throughout our marriage. When I questioned or disagreed with something, she would have a theatrical outburst, give me the quiet treatment, and then do whatever she wanted anyhow. I usually just presented my opinion calmly, watched her explode, and then agreed to her ideas since it was easier than dealing with the consequences. Our friends used to make fun of Kelsey because she always wore the pants in our relationship. They'd elbow me and say, "Happy wife, happy life, right Nathan?" And I'd laugh along with them because what else could I do? Admit it. I was terrified of my own wife's rage. That I'd given up attempting to be an equal partner in my own marriage because the emotional conflict wasn't worth it. I understand how toxic the whole dynamic was, but you know how it is when you're in it. It simply becomes your normal. You adjust, and you tell yourself that every partnership has its eccentricities. I did love her, and we had some good times. But the continual walking on eggshells, the unpredictable explosions, and the sense that my thoughts and tastes were always second best wore me down over time. I simply didn't understand how much, until everything came crashing down. Now, for what happened 3 nights ago. The night that shattered my marriage and whatever remaining illusions I had about who my wife truly was. We were celebrating our 10th anniversary with approximately 50 guests at a lovely event location downtown that we had booked out for the evening. Kelsey had handled the majority of the planning, which was okay with me. Our closest friends, several of my co-workers, and Kelsey's family, her parents and 2 younger brothers, were among those that attended. My own family is abroad. My parents retired to Portugal a few years ago, and my sister is in Australia, so they were unable to attend, which now appears to be a gift in disguise. At least they didn't have to see the show in person. The evening had been going nicely until that point. The meal was delicious, the bar was open, and people were socializing and having a nice time. Several guests made small toasts over dinner, sharing memories and congratulating us. Kelsey seemed joyful and affectionate with me, squeezing my hand under the table and leaning down to whisper jokes about the speeches. After dinner, I planned to go up to the tiny stage area to thank everyone for coming. I'd planned a brief speech, thanking our guests and complimenting Kelsey on our decade together. But before I could make my way up there, Kelsey appeared on stage with her boss, David. I had no idea he was going to the party because he wasn't on the guest list we discussed. Apparently, he arrived approximately an hour into the gathering, after Kelsey had momentarily departed and returned with him. Her family was also surprised to see him. When David walked in, I noticed her father looking at her mother, perplexed. Kelsey snatched the microphone from its stand, and the room became silent, as everyone turned to gaze at her. She had an odd smile on her face, not her typical friendly smile, but something different, almost triumphant. She began to discuss how tonight was a celebration of more than just our 10 years together. It was also about a fresh beginning for her. I recall feeling confused, but I assumed she was talking about a career advancement or something. Then, without warning, she declared that she was leaving me. The room went completely silent. Everyone was staring back and forth at us, absolutely stunned. I felt as if someone had just knocked all the air out of my lungs. My brain was unable to grasp what was going on. The words did not make sense together. Kelsey and leaving me were not compatible notions in my universe. I kept thinking there was a mistake, that I had misheard, or that this was some strange prank. But she kept going, and things got much worse. She gestured to David, who stood alongside her. He's around 10 years older than us, has been divorced twice, and told me she was leaving me for him because she had found someone better. Someone who was actually man enough to give me what I needed, which was a baby, and the opportunity to start a family. These words, man enough, ripped through me like a knife. We'd been trying to have a baby for some years without success, and I'd recently discovered that I had some fertility concerns. It was something I was still processing, something profoundly personal that we'd only communicated with our closest family members. And there she was, shoving it in my face in front of everyone we knew. She concluded by adding, "This is happening now. This is my choice, and I am moving forward with it," in a cold, resolute voice that I barely recognized, as if she were announcing a business decision rather than ending a decade-long marriage. I simply stood there, frozen. It felt like I had been punched in the gut, or worse, like I had been hit by a vehicle yet was still standing. I could not breathe. My face felt hot, then cold. The room appeared to tilt and wobble around me. I looked around and saw all these people looking at me with sympathy and horror. Friends had just congratulated us. Co-workers who now have this as their primary memory of me. Kelsey's relatives looked as surprised as I was. Then I returned my gaze to Kelsey, who was standing proudly next to her boss, a man who'd been to our house for dinner parties, shook my hand, and looked me in the eye while obviously sleeping with my wife behind my back. My mind was racing, trying to figure out when this may have started, how long it had been going on, and how I could have missed all of the indications. We had dinner together the night before, discussing party plans. That morning before work, she kissed me goodbye. How did you get from there to publicly insulting your 10-year-old husband? What type of individual would do that? Kelsey's father abruptly rose up from his table, before I could even begin to respond. He pointed at Kelsey and said, "Your behavior is shameful, Kelsey. The things you are saying about Nathan are hurtful and untrue, and doing this in front of everyone is beyond disrespectful." Her mother stood up next and added, "We did not raise you to behave this way. We do not support what you are doing, not one bit." But her father wasn't finished. He delivered the final blow. "Because of your actions tonight, the way you've humiliated your husband and yourself, we consider you to have cut yourself off from this family. We disown you, Kelsey." All four of them nodded in agreement and walked out of the venue, not even looking back when Kelsey called after them. I've known Kelsey's family for more than a decade. They are traditional but caring people who place a high value on family loyalty and integrity. I had never seen them so united in their contempt and disappointment. I believe it was when the reality of what was going on became clear to me. If her own family, who had always supported and loved her completely, was leaving her because of this, she had definitely gone too far. Kelsey certainly didn't expect that reaction. She began yelling after them, her voice high-pitched and frightened, but I couldn't make out her exact words due to the blood pouring through my ears. David attempted to calm her by placing his hand on her arm, but she forcefully ripped it away. She appeared absolutely deranged at the time, a far cry from the confident woman who had just declared her decision to leave me for a better man. I eventually snapped out of my shock. As I approached the stage, I had a peculiar sense of tranquility. I believe it was my brain's way of protecting me, turning off all feelings so that I could operate. I kept my voice calm, even frigid, as I looked both of them in the eyes and stated, "You need to leave." Now I could hear how different my voice sounded, almost like it belonged to someone else. David, that pompous bastard, had the nerve to try to make things better. He began to say, "Nathan, we need to talk. But I interrupted him mid-sentence. No, we don't. You both need to get out of here before I punch your nose in right now. I pointed to the exit that her family had used. Something in my look must have indicated that I would not say it a third time. They exchanged looks before moving off the stage to a nearby table where they had left some personal belongings. After they departed, 50 people stood there, not saying anything, just shocked faces staring at me, waiting to see what I would do next. My employer was there with his wife, as were some of my oldest friends, who had known us as a couple throughout our relationship. I felt compelled to say something, to bring an end to this terrible train disaster of an evening. I walked back to the stage area, cleared my throat and said, I believe the party is over. I'm sorry it had to end this way. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through it. Thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate your support. What else could I say? Surprise, my wife has been cheating on me with her boss, and I found out at the same moment you did. Or, don't worry, I'm just dying inside. There was nothing that could save the situation, and no words could make any of us forget what had occurred. People began gathering their belongings, whispering to one another, and giving me these dreadful looks of pity, as they walked towards the door. A handful of my closest friends approached me, nervously patting my shoulder or giving me quick hugs while murmuring things like, call if you need anything, or, I'm so sorry, man. I nodded mechanically and thanked them. But I couldn't truly process what they were saying. It felt like I was underwater, with everything muted and distant. Within roughly 30 minutes, the space was empty, with the exception of the venue personnel, who were plainly uncomfortable and attempting to be as discreet as possible as they began cleaning up. I stayed to assist with the first cleanup, partially because it was part of our rental agreement, but primarily because I wanted something to do, something normal to focus on while my brain caught up with reality. The venue manager kept giving me sympathetic looks, which only made things worse. I paid the remaining money, signed the documents she put in front of me, and then left. When I went home and walked into our empty house, it hit me all over again. 10 years of marriage had ended. I sat on the edge of our bed, which we had shared for a decade, and eventually broke down. I'm not sure how long I sat there, but I finally got myself together enough to check my phone. Kelsey sent me a deluge of SMS. Her texts were all over the place, shocked by her family's reaction. I can't believe they would do this to me, admitting the revelation was a mistake, but not backing down from leaving me. I shouldn't have done it that way. But you have to understand, I need to move on. Suggesting we chat or see a counselor, we should sit down with someone who can help us through this transition. Claiming it was a cry for help without explaining what help she needed, or why she'd chosen to beg for help by embarrassing me in public. Then she tried to blame me for her decision to leave, saying, if you had been more attentive, if you had taken my needs more seriously, it wouldn't have come to this. The tone and content of the text kept shifting, as if she was urgently flinging everything at the wall to see what sticks. One moment she was the victim of her terrible family, and the next she was graciously offering to talk things over with me. Then she was the aggrieved party, driven to extremes by my inadequacies as husband. It was classic Kelsey, unable to accept responsibility for her actions, and always seeking for a way to spin the story to make herself look better. This time, however, no spinning was involved. She had passed an uncrossable line. I did not respond to any of them or answer her calls. I decided to contact a divorce lawyer the next morning and set up an appointment to begin the formal process of ending our marriage. I'm writing this to document what happened, not to question whether what I'm doing is correct. I understand what I need to accomplish. I'm simply trying to figure out how my life fell apart so totally in one night. Update. Thank you for all your comments on my first post. Some of you have asked for more information regarding the celebration and Kelsey's family's reaction. Kelsey's disbelief rapidly changed to rage when she saw I wasn't going to go along with her desperate attempts to rewrite what she'd done. Her texts became incessant, ranging from pleas to insults to direct threats. She claimed I was wrecking her life, that I was overreacting, and that I should not have filed for divorce. Nathan, we can fix this. I was just confused. Don't do this. You're acting like a child. You always overreact to everything. You're going to regret this. I'll make sure everyone knows you were never there for me. I did not respond to any of them. I kept them all, and sent the threatening ones to my lawyer. He encouraged me to maintain a strict no-contact policy and communicate exclusively through our attorneys. By the time Kelsey hired her own lawyer, she was already attempting to twist the tale in her favor, telling acquaintances that I was the one who abandoned her, that I had been emotionally neglectful, and that her dramatic declaration at the party was only a moment of weakness. However, I did not have to worry about convincing anyone. I had the truth on my side, as did everyone who witnessed the disastrous incident at the party. Kelsey attempted to claim alimony in her response to the divorce petition, stating that our 10-year marriage, along with our economic disparity, entitled her to financial support. She seemed to believe she could wipe everything and reinvent history. My lawyer and I had planned a direct response. We informed her lawyer that if she sought alimony, we would present sworn affidavits from witnesses, friends, colleagues, and even her own family, who witnessed her publicly humiliating me, announcing she was leaving me for another guy, and being disowned by her own parents. We were not making threats. We were only stating the evidence we planned to submit. Within a few days, Kelsey's lawyer phoned mine to advise us that she was withdrawing her alimony request. That was hardly the end of her issues. Word immediately spread about what she'd done, especially after her family cut her off. Her father was so horrified that he publicly disowned her, and from what I've heard, her mother refused to receive her calls. 2 months later, I discovered through common friends that she had either resigned or been fired from her position at the company where David was her supervisor. I'm not sure whether David threw her under the bus to safeguard his own reputation, or because she became too much of a liability. However, she lost her work and was unable to find anything comparable. Her financial position worsened. She ended up living with one of her cousins, with whom she had a strained relationship, because she couldn't afford her own place. Her convoluted account of events failed to fool her friends. Some remained neutral, but the majority took a step back. In contrast, I maintained a low profile. I went to work, focused on my mental and physical health, and kept silent. The only people who genuinely understood what happened were those who were present that night. And I never sought to push anyone to take sides. Kelsey's desperate attempts to change the story failed. The more she attempted to spin her story, the more others saw through her. Finally, the divorce was formalized. There will be no alimony or division of retirement savings beyond what we have previously agreed upon. I received both the house and the car which I had paid for. I could finally breathe again. But even as I tried to reconstruct my life, a part of me was tormented by that night. The look on Kelsey's face when she made that news. David's smug smirk. The visitor's shocked whispers. Those recollections became ghosts, haunting me in calm moments. But each day the weight became a little lighter. My buddies were there for me. My colleagues, who had always considered me as a dependable, reliable person, admired how I handled things without making it a spectacle. Most significantly, I finally felt at peace knowing that I had done everything I could. I fought with dignity. I protected myself, and I refused to let Kelsey's betrayal kill me. Looking back, I don't recognize who I was at that party. The man who watched in stunned silence while his wife ruined their marriage in front of everyone they knew. But I know who I am now. A man who has endured. My fiancée issued me an ultimatum. Go into debt for her, or lose her. So I selected myself and watched as her fairy stories crumbled, before she reached the altar. My family was not wealthy, but we were not poor either. My father maintained an auto repair shop, and my mother worked part-time at the local cafe while keeping the kids in order. They were traditional, down-to-earth individuals. My father used to say, "You don't spend money you don't have, and you don't borrow unless you're out of options." My mother was the same. If we couldn't afford something, we didn't need it. No complaining, no shortcuts, only hard work and patience. Growing up, I learned the importance of saving early. My first job was mowing lawns for neighbors during the summer, and instead of spending the money on video games like my pals, I saved the majority of it. By the time I graduated from high school, I had saved a couple of $1,000s, which felt like a lot at the age of 18. College was not a huge, glamorous affair for me either. I attended a local public school while also working part-time at a hardware store to supplement my income. My degree was in information technology, which was not exciting, but it provided me with solid employment as a network technician after I graduated. It wasn't the type of job that makes you say, "Wow," but it paid well and I didn't dread going to work. By the age of 31, I had achieved the life I imagined for myself. I had a little apartment, a 10-year-old pickup truck that still worked well, and a reasonable savings account. I wasn't into shiny things. I bought my clothes on a bargain, prepared most of my meals at home, and didn't care about following trends. Life was easy, and I was satisfied. Now I will admit that my dating experiences were not particularly memorable. I'd had a few girlfriends in the past, but nothing meaningful. Most of them wanted to relocate to the city, or live a lifestyle that I couldn't and didn't want to afford. That was all right with me. I believed the proper person would come along someday. Someone who enjoyed the same quiet life I did. Then Tina arrived. I met Tina at a friend's house. My friend Jake had recently moved into a new home, and he had a small party to celebrate. I hadn't planned to meet anyone that day. I arrived in a flannel shirt and jeans, carrying a 6-pack of Coke, just wanting to hang out with my pals. Tina strode in as if she owned the place. She was wearing a flowy dress and sunglasses that seemed more expensive than my truck. She had an aura about her that suggested she was used to being noticed. I recall thinking, she's way out of my league. But we eventually talked. It turns out she was Jake's girlfriend's co-worker who was visiting from the city. I don't recall how the conversation began, but I remember being shocked at how easy it was to communicate with her. She was not as menacing as she appeared. She laughed at my jokes and said she appreciated how relaxed I was. We kept in touch for a few weeks. Tina seemed different from the other women I'd dated. She told me she was weary of the city and liked how authentic everything felt in my hometown. She stated she admired how I didn't try to impress others, and appeared to know exactly what I wanted out of life. For a while, I believed her. Tina began to visit more frequently. She enjoyed the peaceful mornings we'd spend on my porch drinking coffee, and she didn't seem to mind that I lived in a modest, no-frills apartment. She even went fishing with me a few times, but she wasn't very good at it. When she twisted the line or dropped the hook, she laughed at herself, and I thought, this is it, she gets me. We dated for 2 years, and I thought everything was ideal. Sure, Tina had her moments. She'd occasionally gripe about how boring the town was or how she missed her favorite sushi restaurant in town. But she'd always end with something like, but it's worth it to be with you. To be honest, I should have seen the cracks emerging. Tina, for example, used to joke that she couldn't wait for me to acquire a better truck. She'd chuckle and remarked, imagine us pulling up to a fancy restaurant in this thing. At the time, I assumed it was simply her sense of humor. Now I wonder if that was a foreshadowing of what was to come. Then there was the way she discussed her life before we met. Kelsey publicly ended our marriage during our anniversary celebration. Her family disowned her at that moment. I filed for divorce the following day. She demanded alimony. I threatened to provide extensive documentation of her activities. She withdrew her alimony request. She lost her work and was forced to move in with a relative due to financial difficulties. The divorce is now finalized. We negotiated an agreement to divide our assets, which was quite simple given our financial situation, and the court issued the decree terminating our marriage. Kelsey no longer works at her prior job, receives no financial support from me, and lives with her cousin. Her current status is very different from where she was before all of this happened. We don't have direct communication anymore. Everything passes through our lawyers if necessary, which is uncommon now that the divorce is final. As far as I know, her family has not changed their stance and is still not speaking with her. I will not be posting any further updates about this scenario. It's finished, and I can now begin to go forward with my life. The previous 7 months have been the most difficult of my life. For those curious about David, it appears that he and Kelsey did not endure long following her spectacular profession of love. I've heard they split up around the same time she left the company, but I don't know the specifics, and I honestly don't care. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.